My name is Ray.
Hi, this is Michael.
And welcome to another episode of Ray's Economics Cluebook. Today we're talking about cost function.
Okay.
So let's look at first total cost and marginal cost. Now, first of all, total cost obviously is our total cost, and marginal cost is basically the per unit additional cost of an additional input in comparison to our total output. And so basically, by increasing output by 1, the increase in total cost is our marginal cost. And by looking at our total cost, we see that when we first start out with total cost, when we first increase output, but in the beginning, in the lower levels of total output, when we first increase it, total cost increases at a relatively slow rate because we have greater efficiency when we have lower levels of output. We have greater levels of per unit efficiency. We have more resources for to work. We have more resource efficiency because, for instance, each worker, for instance, has more land to work on, has more tools for themselves to work with, etc. Just as less of a crowded effect.
Sure.
But at a certain point, eventually, when you get past a certain point, total cost grows at an increasing rate because we have reduced returns to input, reduced return and more limited resources. For instance, workers are more crowded, and they just are less efficient in general. Per unit efficiency decreases, and so because there's so many unit inputs per input efficiency is decreasing, and so marginal cost obviously the marginal cost is basically the slope of the total cost. Each point on the marginal cost is the slope for that corresponding point on total cost, or basically in calculus terms, a derivative of the total cost. And so basically, it would make sense that when total cost stagnates the most or grows at the lowest rate at a certain point, that rate will correspond with the lowest point on the marginal cost curve at the same time. So the lowest point on the marginal cost curve is represented as delta marginal cost or change in marginal cost over delta Q, change in output or change in quantity, equals 0, which means that marginal cost at the lowest point is is not decreasing, but it's also not increasing.
It's noticeable that marginal curve is kind of like a U curve, U shape. Okay, so it's actually just as Ray said, it's just a slope of the total curve, and if you do that in using some geometry and algebra, it's very easy to figure out. Okay.
And so basically, from this we can also deduce basically essentially that the marginal cost curve, the U-shaped curve as Michael mentioned, it meets the average total cost curve and the average variable cost curve at both their lowest points. So the lowest point of the average total cost curve is where the marginal cost curve intersects it. And the lowest point of the average variable cost curve is where the marginal cost curve intersects it as well.
And actually you can just prove that using some basic geometry and algebra knowledge, and we're not going to repeat it here. We just get to the conclusion.
So it's important to differentiate what the average total cost and what average variable cost, what their implications are for business. Average variable cost is basically the average total variable cost over total quantity of output. The variable costs include things like labor, because labor is variable. They include things like capital input, like tools, but more fixed costs in the short run are things like land or just in startup tools like utilities or things like that.
Now, the fixed cost it's pretty simple. It's just sometimes we just call that overhead cost, right?
Overhead cost.
You have a lot of examples that you have to pay, right? The fixed cost. It's not like a variable, for example.
Many people will falsely assume, perhaps, that when a company's returns or revenue, marginal revenue, is below their average total cost curve point at that corresponding production point, then the company shuts down in the short run. But that's not true. If this was the case for the long run, the company will shut down. But in the short run, the company does not necessarily shut down because there is still potential for the company to reach the average total cost curve, go above it in the long run, and also it will not make sense to shut down because average total cost curves involve or include fixed costs, and so shutting down the business will not change the fact that you still have to pay those fixed costs no matter what. Like Michael said, those overhead costs like utilities. So these are really just sunk costs at that point. Shutting down will not make any difference. So in the short run, a company will still run even if it's below the average total cost curve at its current production point.
Yes, it's very important to note actually, just as Ray mentioned, actually the AVC intersects with the MC when AVC is the lowest. Okay, and this is the lowest AVC is a break point. For the firm whether they want to continue or shut down.
If you're wondering what exactly in the short run is the shutdown point for a firm when it actually has to shut down? Case closed.
Yeah.
It's the average. It's when its marginal returns do not meet its average variable costs at that point of production.
Yeah.
Because if you can't even pay, for instance, a variable cost like labor or capital, your company is just not going to survive at all.
Yeah, the thing is, in the short run, the firm probably still want to continue operation as long as market price, okay, marginal revenue in a perfect competitive market, the market price is above the AVC lowest point. Yeah, because in the short run, at least they still make some economic profit if we only look at the AVC, because fixed cost is always there.
Yeah.
And by continue operation, the firms, of course, hope they can actually get to the point where the market price can be increased.
Yeah.
Right? Or they can get more efficient.
Yeah.
Because even if they shut down, they still have to pay the fixed cost.
Yes. So the short run shutdown point is basically as long as this firm produces at or above the average variable cost, which just means that the lowest point of average variable cost curve is a shutdown point for the firm. In the long run, this becomes the average total cost curve.
Yes, and ATC equals MC, which is the lowest ATC point, and actually this time the company makes a normal profit in a perfect competitive market, because usually it means the market price exactly equals the ATC, which means they equals zero economic profit, and we call that normal profit, right, in the long run. Okay.
And so basically, what are the impact of taxes then? Because this also applies to taxes.
Yeah.
If we have a lump sum tax, then basically all a lump sum tax does is it increases our average total cost curve, because at each production point there's going to be the same tax applied as lump sum. And so it increases our average total cost curve so that we have if we were producing a normal profit, now we're producing at a loss.
Yeah.
However, marginal cost stays the same because it's not a per unit tax. It's just a lump sum on all production points, and basically that's what happens. However, if we have an impact of a per unit tax, since the marginal cost also involves per unit cost, basically, if we have per unit tax placed, then the marginal cost increases as well. It shifts, and also the average total cost obviously also shifts because any tax shifts, and so we have a compounded effect of loss because we produce at a lower quantity, and we have a loss for producing.
Yeah, because our price is higher than demand, right? The market price. Yeah, but in both tax actually are negative for the firms because they kind of like squeeze out of the market. But in the long run, the market price will adjust to those tax impact.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully so companies can go back to the market. Okay.
So for final clues, basically ATC and AVC both meet marginal costs at their lowest points. If it meets ATC, the lowest point of ATC is basically our point of normal profit for a firm in the long run. However, in the short run, the firm can only continue to run if at its shutdown price at the lowest point of the AVC at least.
Yeah.
And so we see it through these graphics. We see the shutdown points and the point of normal profit for the short run and long run. And we see our normal profit point is basically our long-term shutdown point per se.
It's not really shutdown because in the long run, people always say that what makes normal profit, right? Economic profit.
At least that's what we hope. If we can't make a normal profit in the long run, then our firm in the long run might not exactly survive. But that's another story altogether.
Yeah.
And so that is it for today.
Yeah. So finally, I want to say the graphics are very important. So I hope you guys just can, memorize those graphics about all the cost functions, and it's gonna benefit for you to, understand that more easily. Okay. See you next time. Bye bye.